This is of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford, and it has been adapted. Their safe arrival at Cape Cod. But to admit other things, that I may be brief, after long beating at sea, they fell at what is known as Cape Cod. They were not a little joyful. Being thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean, and delivered them from all the perils and miseries thereof, again to set their feet on the firm and stable earth, their proper element. But here I cannot but a pause and stand half amazed at this poor people's present condition. Having passed the vast ocean and a sea of troubles, they had no friends to welcome them, nor inns to entertain or refresh their weather-beaten bodies, no houses or towns for shelter. This made me think of how it is recorded in the biblical scripture as a mercy to Paul and the apostle and his shipwrecked company, that the barbarians showed them small kindness in refreshing them when they arrived in needing of shelter, and the natives providing them with shelter, food, and comfort. I also hoped God would help us for our sacrifice in coming to the New World and being his faithful followers. Currently, what we could see and hear is but a hideous and desolate wilderness, full of wild beasts and so many wild men, barbarians, savages. However, even with the unknown and difficulty, this wilderness and the new world will feed our hope as we focus on God and not our present obstacles in front of us. Summer was over, and the whole country, full of woods and thickets, represented a wild and savage hue. If we looked behind them, there was the mighty ocean, which they had passed and was now a main bar and gulf to separate them from all the civil parts of the world. The first encounter. Being thus arrived at Cape Cod on the 11th of November, and necessity calling them to look out a place for habitation, they, having brought a large shallop, or a small boat, with them out of England, stowed in quarters in the ship. They now got her out to work on and trim up, but being much bruised and shattered in the ship with the foul weather, they saw she would be long in mending. After this, the shallop being ready, they set out again for the better discovery of this place, and the master of the ship desired to go himself. So then there went some 30 men, but found it to be no harbor for ships, but only for boats. There was also found 2 of their Indians' houses covered with mats, and sundry of their implements in them. But the native people would run away and could not be seen. Also, there was found more of their corn and of their beans of various colors. The corn and the beans they, the English, brought away, purposing to give them, the Indians, full satisfaction when they should meet with any of them. About some 6 months afterward they did, to their good content. And here is to be noted a special providence of God, and a great mercy to this poor people, that here they got seed to plant them corn next year from the natives, or else they might have starved. For they had none, nor any likelihood to get any till the season had been past. Neither is it likely that they had had this, if the first voyage had not been made, for the ground was now all covered with snow and hard frozen. But the Lord is never wanting unto his in the greatest needs. Let his holy name have all the praise. The month of November being spent in these affairs, and much foul weather falling in, the 6th of December, they sent out their shallop again, with 10 of their principal men, upon further discovery, intending to circulate the deep bay of Cape Cod. The weather was very cold, and it froze so hard as the spray of the sea lightning on their coasts. They were, if they had been glazed. The next night they landed and made them barricade, as usually they did every night, with logs, stakes, and pine boughs, the height of men, partly to shelter them from the cold and wind, and partly to defend them from any sudden assaults of the savages, if they should surround them. So, being very weary, they betook them to rest. But about midnight they heard a hideous and great cry, and their sentinel called, "Arm! Arm!" So they stood to their arms and shot off a couple muskets, and then the noise ceased. They concluded it was a company of wolves or such like wild beasts. So they rested, and after prayer they prepared for breakfast, and started carrying things down to the boat. Yet as it fell out, the water being not high enough, they laid them down on the bankside and came up to breakfast. All of a sudden they heard a great strange cry, which they found to be the same voices they heard in the night. And one of the company came running and cried, "Men! Indians! Indians!" And withal their arrows came flying amongst them. Their men ran with all speed to recover their arms, as by the good providence of God they did. In the meantime, of those that were there ready, 2 muskets were discharged at them, and 2 more stood ready in the entrance of their rendezvous, but were commanded not to shoot till they could take full aim at them. And the other 2 charged again with all the speed, for there were only 4 had arms there, and defended the barricado, which was first assaulted. The cry of the Indians was dreadful, especially when they, the Indians, saw their men, the English, run out of the rendezvous toward the shallop to recover their arms, the Indians wheeling about upon them. But some running out with coats of mail on, and cutlasses in their hands, they, the English, soon got their arms, and let fly amongst them, the Indians, and quickly stopped their violence. Thus it pleased God to vanquish their enemies and give them deliverance, and by his special providence so to dispose that not any one of them were either hurt or hit, though their arrows came close by them and on every side of them. The sundry of coats which hung up in the barricado were shot through and through. Afterwards they gave God solemn thanks and praise for their deliverance, and gathered up a bundle of arrows and sent them to England afterward by the master of the ship, and called that place the First Encounter. The starving time. But that which was most sad and lamentable was, that in 2 or 3 months' time half of their company died, especially in the depth of winter, and wanting houses and other comforts, being infected with the scurvy and other diseases which this long voyage had brought upon them. Sadly, out of the original 11 or 100, only odd persons, scarce 50, remained. And of these, in the time of most distress, there was but 6 or 7 persons who helped the sick. And they spared no pains night nor day, but with the abundance of toil and hazard on their own health fetched them wood, made them fires, dressed them meat, made their beds, washed their loathsome clothing, clothed and unclothed them. Indians' relations. All this while the Indians came skulking about them, and would sometimes show themselves aloof off. But when any approached near them, they would run away. And once they, the Indians, stole away the colonists' tools, where they had been at work, and were gone to dinner. But the 16th of March, a certain Indian came boldly amongst them, and spoke to them broken English, which they could well understand, but marveled at it. They were able to communicate with him, and find that he was not of these parts, but belonged to the eastern parts, where some English ships came to fish, with whom he was acquainted, and could name sundry of them by their names, amongst whom he had got his language. He became profitable to them because he told the visitors about the land and the people. His name was Samoset. He told them of another Indian whose name was Squanto, a native of this place, who had been in England and could speak better English than himself. Being, after some time of entertainment and gifts dismissed, a while after he came in, and 5 more with him, and they brought again all the tools that were stolen away before, and made way for the coming of the great Sachem, called Massoet, who, about 4 or 5 days after, came with the chief of his friends and other attendants, with the aforesaid Squanto, with whom, after friendly entertainment and some gifts given him, they made a peace with him, which hath now continued this 24 years in these terms. The treaty between the Plymouth colonists and the Wampanoag. 1. That neither he nor any of his should injure or do hurt to any of their people. 2. That if any of his did hurt to any of theirs, he should send the offender, that they might punish him. 3. That if anything were taken away from any of theirs, he should cause it to be restored, and they should do the like to his. 4. And if did unjustly war against him, they would aid him. If any did war against them, he should aid them. 5. He should send his neighbors' confederates to certify them of this, that they might not wrong them, but might likewise compromise in the conditions of peace. 6. That when their men came to them, they should leave their bows and arrows behind them. The first Thanksgiving. They began now to gather in the small harvest that they had before winter, having health, strength, and supplies for the winter. For as some were thus employed in the affairs abroad, others were exercised in fishing, about cod and bass and other fish, of which they took good store, of which every family had their portion. All the summer there was no want, and now began to come in a store of fowl as winter approached, of which this place did abound when they came first, but afterwards decreased by degrees. And besides waterfowl, there was a great store of wild turkey, of which they took many, besides venison, etc. Besides, they had about a peck a meal a week to a person, or now since harvest, Indian corn to that proportion, which made many afterwards write so largely of their plenty here to their friends in England, which were not feigned but true reports.